The great halls of the Galactic Council were silent that evening. Rows of alien leaders sat in curved chambers made of glass and steel, their faces lit by the glow of countless stars outside. These were the rulers of the galaxy, proud and powerful, who believed they had mapped every truth of the universe. But tonight, a single subject filled the chamber, a subject so strange that even the most fearless among them shifted uneasily. The subject was human myths. An old historian, his scales cracked with age, stood in the center. His voice trembled as he read from a screen filled with ancient human records. "The humans wrote of fleets of fire," he said, "ships that crossed the skies like storms. They spoke of wars so vast that whole suns grew dark. They warned of beings who vanished into shadows and of fleets that returned when the galaxy had grown proud." The chamber filled with laughter. Many leaders mocked the words. To them, these were nothing more than the tales of a primitive species, long forgotten and too weak to matter. The humans, after all, had lived on a backwater planet. They had no great fleets, no empire, no claim to the stars. Their myths were just stories told to children, no different from bedtime tales. But not. Everyone laughed. One council member, a tall figure with silver skin and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "What if they were not stories?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but heavy. "What if they were warnings? What if the humans were not writing fables, but recording memories of something real?" The laughter died slowly. Some hissed, some whispered, but none could deny the weight in her words. Still, the council dismissed her. They returned to their debates about trade, power, and war, leaving the human myths to fade like smoke in the air. But far beyond their chambers, in the dark edges of space, something moved. It began with whispers. Among the outer colonies, traders returning from the rim spoke of shadows that blocked the stars. Miners claimed they had seen lights moving like predators across the void. Pilots swore they had heard signals, low, ancient signals, filled with voices speaking in an old human tongue. At first, no one listened. Reports were dismissed as madness, as tricks of the mind brought on by isolation. Then the signals grew louder. On the cold world of Zerna Prime, a station's sensors caught the first clear image. Ships, enormous ships. Their hulls glowed with lines of fire, their shapes circular and sharp, like discs of steel and flame. They moved in perfect silence, drifting like hunters across the black sea of space. The image spread through the colonies within hours and soon reached the council itself. Panic stirred. For the first time, the rulers looked back at the human myths with different eyes. The descriptions matched: the fleets of fire, the suns that grew dark, the silence that followed. It was all there, written in the old records of Earth. One historian shouted in the council, "We were warned. The humans told us in their myths, but we never listened." Still, many leaders refused to believe. They called the sightings tricks, illusions, or perhaps the work of some unknown empire trying to frighten them. Yet fear could not be hidden. Messages flew across the galaxy as every fleet prepared for war. Refugees from the Rim fled inward, carrying tales of entire colonies that had gone silent overnight. On one planet, a child whispered an old human story to her frightened parents. The story spoke of a fleet that would return when the galaxy had grown cruel. The fleet would rise in fire and the stars would freeze before it. The parents trembled, for the story matched exactly what the news had shown. Meanwhile, the silver-skinned council member who had once spoken of warnings stood alone on a balcony, watching the stars. Her heart was heavy, her mind filled with dread. She remembered every word of the myths she had studied. She knew they were not lies. She knew the humans had left these warnings behind for a reason. The signals came again, stronger than before. This time they carried sound. Across thousands of systems, radios and comms filled with a deep, unbroken voice. It spoke in a language forgotten by most but recognized by some. It was human. The message was simple. We are coming. Silence followed. Across the galaxy, leaders froze. Soldiers felt their strength leave their bones. Civilians whispered the old stories, their voices shaking as they repeated the lines told for generations. The myths are not myths, one alien whispered. They are history. They are truth. The fleets of the galaxy gathered at their borders, waiting, preparing, but even their strongest weapons felt small. For they knew that myths are not born without reason. Myths are memories buried in time, waiting to be remembered. And now, as the stars dimmed on the edge of known space, the galaxy finally understood. The forgotten warnings were never meant for humans alone. They were meant for everyone. The day of reckoning had begun. The galaxy did not sleep that cycle. From the frozen moons of the outer rim to the crowded trade stations near the core, the whispers spread like fire. Every screen, every channel, every street echoed with the same words, "The humans are coming." At first, rulers tried to calm their people. Speeches were broadcast across systems. Leaders stood tall, their voices practiced and steady, claiming the fleets were nothing to fear. They said the stories were exaggerated. They promised the galaxy's armies were strong enough to crush any intruder. But the people were not blind. They had seen the images, the enormous circular ships glowing like suns, the shadows that moved in silence. And they remembered the old human myths that matched those very shapes. Fear grew sharper when colonies began to vanish. A mining station near the Drellin belt sent a distress signal, reporting strange lights filling the sky. The signal cut off mid-scream, and the station was never heard from again. Days later, an entire convoy of warships vanished without leaving a trace, their last message only static. Panic spread like a disease. Ordinary citizens began digging through archives of old Earth records, searching for answers. They found songs, carvings, stories passed from mouth to mouth. Every tale told the same truth: fleets of fire, fleets of judgment, fleets that returned when pride had grown too great. For centuries, aliens had laughed at these stories. Now they whispered them in fear. In the council halls, the silver-skinned member who had once warned them stood again before her peers. Her voice was cold. "You dismissed the warnings," she said. "Now the warnings walk in fire." The other leaders avoided her eyes. Their pride had already begun to crack. Each of them had built empires on the belief that they were masters of the galaxy. But now, with every report of ships moving closer, with every station falling silent, they felt smaller than ever before. Meanwhile, soldiers across the galaxy prepared for war. Armies filled their hangars, fleets gathered at border systems, and weapons were tested day and night. Yet even the bravest soldiers could not hide their trembling hands. Many had grown up hearing fragments of the old human myths told as bedtime warnings. And now those bedtime stories were alive. On the outer colonies, refugees ran inward, carrying rumors. Some claimed they had seen the human ships moving without engines, gliding like ghosts across the void. Others swore they had heard voices whispering. Through the comms, not in words, but in emotions, anger, sorrow, and judgment. No one could prove these tales, but no one doubted them either. The turning point came when the mysterious broadcasts returned. This time the voice was stronger, clearer, filling every channel, overriding every system. It spoke again in the ancient human tongue, but now translations appeared almost instantly. The words were simple. You were warned. The myths were not. Stories. The fleet rises again. The voice was calm, but behind it was a weight that pressed into the hearts of every listener. No one laughed. No one spoke. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy froze. Religious leaders declared the humans were not a people, but a force of fate. Scholars argued they were survivors of an ancient empire erased from history. Soldiers whispered they were spirits, returned to avenge the past. None of them knew the truth. All of them agreed on one thing: the myths were real. Across the stars, ordinary beings prayed, hiding in their homes as their skies filled with strange shadows. Children cried as they repeated the old warnings their ancestors once told. Entire planets demanded answers, but no answers came. Only silence from the council chambers. And in that silence, fear grew. The galaxy had always believed it was unshakable, too vast to tremble. But now, for the first time, entire civilizations felt the weight of something greater than themselves. The humans had been forgotten, their myths ignored. But myths had teeth, and the galaxy was about to feel them. The silver-skinned council member stood alone once more, her eyes fixed on the edge of space. Her words were barely a whisper, but across the stars they carried the truth. None wished to say aloud, "The rising fear," she said. "It is only the beginning." The galaxy had prepared its armies. Fleets of warships filled the borders like steel walls, their weapons primed, their soldiers trained for a battle they did not fully understand. For weeks they waited in silence, their eyes fixed on the stars beyond. Every system, every world, held its breath. Then the void stirred. From the blackness, shapes emerged, massive human warships larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their hulls glowed with faint lines of crimson light, as though fire lived beneath their skin. Some ships were shaped like discs, others like towering blades cutting across the stars. They did not roar, they did not thunder. They moved in silence, drifting with a calm that was more terrifying than any storm. The alien fleets opened their channels, demanding the intruders identify themselves. For a long moment, no reply came. Only the soft hum of static filled the air. Then across every ship, every system, a voice echoed. "You were warned." The words were ancient, but translations filled every screen. Every soldier heard them, every leader, every citizen. The voice was calm yet heavy, like stone crushing down upon glass. Fear struck even the bravest warriors. Still, commanders gave the order. Weapons fired, beams of light, missiles of plasma, waves of destruction filled the void. But the human fleet did not flinch. Their shields shimmered once, like water touched by wind, and the galaxy's strongest weapons dissolved into nothing. A silence deeper than before followed. Alien soldiers stared at their screens, their hearts pounding. They had unleashed their full power, and it had meant nothing. One human dreadnought drifted forward. It was enormous, a floating fortress with a hull etched in glowing symbols. Those who studied human myths recognized the shapes. They were not decorations. They were warnings written into steel. The dreadnought opened a channel. A figure appeared. On every screen, a human commander, face shadowed but eyes burning with cold fire. Her words struck like thunder. "Your arrogance blinded you. Your cruelty chained worlds. We told you long ago." The myths were never lies. They were memories. They were truth. The council chambers fell silent. The galaxy's leaders, who once laughed at human myths, now felt small and fragile. Then came the act that froze the stars. The human fleet raised no weapons. Instead, light flared across the void. In an instant, the entire alien armada, the proudest fleets of the galaxy, was locked in place. Engines shut down. Weapons died. Control vanished. Ships drifted helplessly, caught in an invisible grip. Panic spread across the bridges. Commanders shouted, soldiers slammed controls, but nothing worked. Their fleets were frozen as if the humans held the stars themselves in their hands. The human commander spoke again. "We warned you. You chose to ignore. Now you will remember." Then the light faded, and the human fleet turned away, vanishing back into the void as silently as it had arrived. The alien armada floated, crippled and broken, without a shot fired. Entire civilizations watched in shock, their pride shattered. The myths had spoken of fleets that froze stars. Now they had seen it with their own eyes. On every world, whispers rose louder than before. Refugees prayed, soldiers trembled, leaders hid their fear behind hollow words. But in every heart, the truth had sunk deep. The humans had returned, and no force in the galaxy could stand against them. The first encounter was not a battle. It was a lesson, a warning fulfilled, and the galaxy, for the first time in its long history, understood what it meant to be powerless. The galaxy had always believed in its strength. Empires rose and fell, wars raged across the stars, but through it all, the HFY Council held power. To them, myths were entertainment, old tales told by primitives like the humans. But after the first encounter, everything changed. The fleets that once inspired fear now felt like broken toys. Commanders looked at their ships and no longer saw strength. They saw weakness, fragile shells compared to the human dreadnoughts that moved like gods through the void. Soldiers spoke less and less. They trained, but every movement carried doubt. They had fired their strongest weapons, and the humans had not even blinked. Across the galaxy, worlds turned inward. On one planet, crowds gathered in temples, praying to gods they had long abandoned. On another, citizens rioted, demanding their leaders explain why myths had come alive. Even children whispered the old warnings, their eyes wide with fear. Stories once told to amuse now felt like prophecy. The council chamber was darker than ever. Leaders spoke in low voices, their words filled with worry. They reopened archives they had ignored for centuries. They read through every line of human myths, searching for answers they had once mocked. To their horror, they realized the myths were not fiction, but fragments of history. The humans had walked among the stars before. The warnings were memories of their power, scattered across cultures. Hidden in stories, waiting to be remembered, the silver-skinned council member stood once more, her voice cutting through the fear. "You laughed at the myths," she said, "but they were not meant to amuse you. They were left behind so you would be ready when the humans returned. And now you are not ready." Some leaders begged for unity, urging the council to prepare a new alliance. Others whispered of surrender before war could begin. Pride still lingered in some voices, but it was hollow, weak, crumbling like old stone. The fear deepened when the humans returned. This time, they did not attack a fleet. They surrounded a capital world. Billions watched as the skies filled with glowing ships, their engines burning like suns. Yet no weapon fired, no city burned. Instead, a single message was broadcast to every screen, every channel, every mind. A human commander appeared. Her eyes were steady, her face calm, but her words carried the weight of centuries. "You enslaved, you silenced, you mocked. You thought yourselves untouchable. We warned you long ago. Now we return, not as myth, but as memory. We are the judgment you tried to forget." The message ended. The fleet hovered in silence above the world. They did not fire. They did not leave. They waited, and the waiting was worse than any battle. Panic tore through the planet. Entire governments crumbled overnight. Families fled into the wilderness, though there was nowhere to run. Priests declared the end of days. Scholars admitted their ignorance, and generals stared at their powerless fleets with hollow eyes. The illusion of strength was gone. The galaxy, once proud, now felt like prey, and the humans, silent and watching, let that fear spread like fire. The galaxy no longer looked at humans as a forgotten people. They looked at them as a force older than history itself. The illusions of strength had been broken, and now every world waited for what came next. Above the Council's capital world, the human fleet hovered in silence. Their ships glowed like suns, surrounding the planet with a ring of fire. Entire cities stood frozen, their lights dimmed, their people staring at the skies in terror. Armies that once marched with pride now stood still, their weapons lowered, knowing they were useless. Then the humans spoke again. The commander appeared once more, her face clear now, her voice steady and cold. "We warned you," she said. "You ignored the warnings. You built your power on chains, on cruelty, on pride. You thought the myths were lies. Now you stand in their shadow." The council leaders trembled. Some begged for mercy. Others tried to argue, their voices breaking as they spoke of peace. But the humans did not bend. Their fleet burned brighter, their silence heavier than any weapon. Then came the judgment. The human commander raised her hand, and light filled the skies. For a heartbeat, the galaxy thought destruction had come. But the light did not burn cities, did not crush armies. Instead, it swept through every system, shutting down fleets, disabling weapons, silencing entire empires. In one moment, the galaxy was left powerless. The humans had taken no lives, but they had taken control. "You will choose," the commander said. "Surrender and live under new law, or resist and fall into silence. There will be no third path." The words carried across stars, reaching every world, every colony. Some leaders broke instantly, begging to surrender. Others hesitated, their pride still clinging to old power. But in their hearts they knew the truth. Resistance would mean extinction. On the capital world, silence stretched long after the message ended. Billions held their breath, waiting. Finally, the council bowed their heads. They had mocked the myths, they had ignored the warnings, and now they had been judged. The humans turned their ships away, leaving the skies still burning with their glow. They had not destroyed the galaxy. They had done something far greater. They had shown that myths were truth, that warnings were real, and that power did not belong to those who mocked, but to those who endured. From that day forward, no one laughed at human stories. No one dismissed their words as primitive tales. The myths had returned, and with them humanity's fleet. The galaxy would never be the same.